You're listening to Disability Without the Detour. Join us as we dissect cases, discuss policies, and interview experts to illuminate the intersection of law and disability.
Welcome to Disability Without the Detour with Mark Aiello. I'm Sam Henninger. I'm really excited to talk to Mark because we're going to dive into topics such as Supplemental Security Income and Social Security Disability Insurance. And to get things started, could you explain what these two things are in the first place?
Sure, absolutely, Sam. That's a good question because people get those confused and mixed up all the time. So we have two programs, Supplemental Security Income, SSI, and Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. So those are the two claims, and people mix them up quite often. SSDI, Social Security Disability, if you will, is funded through our FICA taxes. When you look at your check, if you had a paper check or your electronic check, you'll see FICA, which stands for Federally Insured Contributions Act. That's what funds Social Security. That takes care of your retirement benefits, widow's benefits, and disability benefits. So as we work and pay into the system, that allows us to get those benefits back when we need them. Supplemental Security Income is funded through the general tax rules. That is welfare, for lack of a better term. That's for people that have not worked enough and have not contributed into the system. So you have an SSI benefit and an SSDI benefit. It's all handled under the Social Security Administration, but they're two different programs. And if you were to go into your local Social Security office, you won't notice it, but it's almost as if there's an imaginary line down the middle. And everybody that handles SSI is on one side. Everybody who handles SSD is on the other. One side doesn't necessarily understand what the other side is doing. The reason why they're under the same umbrella is because the disability standard for each is handled by the same group, and it's the same standard. But for SSI, you have to be impoverished. SSD, you have to have contributed enough into the system.
Okay, so let's dive in more about the eligibility side of what qualifies someone for each of those and how do they differ?
For each, you have to meet the definition of disability. But one's based on having worked enough and paid into the system enough. The other is based on not having enough. For the SSI limits, it's very, very strict limit. An individual can have no more than $2,000 in the bank. You're allowed a house with household furnishings, one automobile, and a prepaid burial allowance. And that's it. If you have more than that, you will not qualify for SSI no matter how bad off you are health-wise. So it's very tough. For SSD, you have to have worked enough. Basically, you have to have what's considered 40 quarters of coverage. You earn a certain amount of money each quarter of work. That earns a credit. It goes in. If you have 40 quarters, you have enough. So if you have enough quarters of coverage, you can qualify for SSDI, again, assuming that you have enough of a health impairment to qualify.
And 40 quarters meaning 10 years?
Basically 10 full years of work, yeah, right, within certain time frames.
Okay. What have been some misconceptions you've heard people have about either of these?
Well, first of all, there's people mixing up the two programs, right? One you hear a lot is people complaining that so-and-so is on SSD and he's never worked or whatnot. That's not possible. Okay, you have to pay into the system to get the SSD back. That you just do, right? You have to pay in to get out. So if you haven't paid in enough, you're not going to get the SSD no matter what you hear on TV or from your neighbor down the street. That's not going to happen. And a common misperception that I hear is that people will say, well, I can't do my job anymore. I'm disabled. That's not necessarily true. Right? So we have to prove that you can't do any work, any substantial, they call it substantial gainful activity, but basically breaking it down, it means you can't do any work. So it's not so much to show that you can't do your past job necessarily. We have to show you can't do any other job as well.
The criteria seems to be increasingly specific as you describe it.
And it becomes more and more specific. No two cases are the same, Sam. Every case is different. And they're all predicated upon age, work history, education, what impairment you may have. So the rules are there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of specifics involved for each particular case.
Could you explain, we're talking about a bit of the qualifications, but let's talk a bit more about the benefits and even the application process for both of these programs.
Well, for SSD as an example, the benefit is dependent upon what you've paid in. The more you've paid in, the higher your benefit will be, subject to the caps each year. So that's on the SSD benefit. Because people will often ask me, Sam, well, how much can I get? I don't know. I don't know about your work history, but you can find out. You can go to the government website, ssa.gov, and create an account for yourself, and you can look up what your benefit chart is. So you can see what you would get if you qualified for disability, or if you took early retirement at 62, or retirement at 65 or 67, et cetera. So you can look that up quite easily. That's on the SSD side. On the SSI side, that's set by the government each year, and it titers up depending if we get COLA adjustments and whatnot. So the SSI benefit depends on each year, and then of course some household issues as well.
What does it look like to apply to each of these?
Well, the application process is similar. We can help people with the SSD applications, and we can add in an SSI application with that SSD app. For a strictly SSI app, they don't allow lawyers or other people to help with those. Those are something that you have to do on your own. So if someone wants to file for SSD, I want to meet with that person and help them gather all the information. They'll tell you, or the administration will say, well, you can apply here. Just go onto the website and apply here. And some practitioners will tell prospective clients, go ahead and apply, and if you get denied, come see me. I don't like that. I don't want that to occur. I want you to come see me first before you apply. Let's talk about your situation. Let's put a plan together for you. And then we put the application in together, so that I'm involved and my staff is involved right from the very beginning, and we can help guide you through it. On the SSI side, I still want to meet with folks, talk to them about what the process will be, help them get that application scheduled with the local office. And then once it's in, I can step in at that point.
In your experience, from what you've seen, what disabilities or conditions typically qualify someone for SSI or SSD?
Well, Sam, all kinds of conditions and problems can qualify somebody. It's always extent of how bad is it, or how long is it? So there are multitudes of conditions. It could be orthopedic, it could be neurological, it could be mental and emotional, it could be a disease, a cancer condition, anything along those lines. So there's all sorts of issues, cardiac, lung, etc. The administration, I'll call it a book. It's not, nothing's a book anymore, right? Everything's online. But they have a book, if you will, and it's broken up into 12 sections. And it's got an orthopedic section, a neurological section, stuff with diseases, all sorts of things. I mean, again, anything you can think of, mental and emotional issues, all kinds of stuff, 12 different sections. So if you have a condition that meets the parameters of one of their sections, then you can be qualified for disability. That's one way. The other way is to go through what's known as the sequential evaluation, a 5-step sequential evaluation, which ends in, is there any work that this person can do? And so those are the different ways that we try to establish disability. I'll look at the listings. We call it the medical listings. We'll look at the listings and see if I can get somebody involved or found disabled, depending on what their particular condition is. And if that doesn't work, we'll go through the sequential process. And then there's another part of that called the grid rules, based upon a person's age, education, work history, and physical limitations, whether they're limited to sedentary, light, medium, or heavy activities. So there's all these different factors that we try to guide our client's case into.
And you mentioned earlier about, for SSD, there is a requirement to pay in for a certain amount of time in order to be eligible for those benefits. But I'm curious to know if there's any other considerations or aspects about work history or employment record that impact someone's eligibility for either.
There are some modifications of that rule if somebody's younger. right? If somebody's and again, it all depends on the age, and not to get into the nitty gritty of it. But if somebody's younger, maybe somebody's just fresh out of high school or college and haven't had the chance to work 10 full years yet, right? If they've worked enough within their age group, then they can still qualify. So there's that consideration. But basically for SSD, you have to have enough time in, if you will, enough credits paid into it to get out of it.
Are there any specific medical or financial requirements that applicants have to meet when applying for SSI or SSD?
That's a great question, because often people will say to me, well, I've got some extra filing for SSD as an example. I've got a house up north, right? A cottage somewhere off the lake, or I've got a couple of jet skis, or, I've got an inheritance coming. Will I be able to maintain my SSDI? Absolutely, you can. It doesn't matter. For SSD, it does not matter what your financial background is. I always tell my clients, pick your favorite millionaire, and if that person found himself or herself unable to work, they would still potentially qualify for SSDI. So that's on the SSDI side. On the SSI side, you have to be impoverished. So going back, for an individual, no more than $2,000 in a bank. For a couple, it's $3,000, not much better. So you have those asset limits there: one house with household furnishings, one automobile, and a prepaid burial allowance. And that's it. That's all a person is really allowed to have.
Wow. So what would you say then, in your experience, have been some challenges or pitfalls that applicants may face during this application process, and how do you help them navigate effectively?
What I've run across a lot, Sam, is that people have a hard time sort of facing their limits, right? Facing their disability that they may have, or the injury that they suffer from, and what that's done to them daily. So people will, I don't want to say they exaggerate, because that's not right, but maybe they don't fully want to grasp how limited they are now. So a frequent question somebody will be asked will be, how much weight can you lift? And people will remember back to before they were hurt, or when they were younger, and they'll say, I can lift 50 pounds, but they've got serious back problems, right? But they think they can lift 50 pounds. Well, and I often say, well, if you can lift 50 pounds, why are we applying for disability? You should be able to do something if you can lift 50 pounds, because they haven't really thought about it, Sam, right? They know what they used to do. They know what they want to do. They haven't really thought about what are they capable of doing now. So I think that's a really common thing, is you got to be brutally honest with yourself about what your limits are. And I'm not saying being dramatic or anything like that. You got to be truthful. Can you really lift 50 pounds? Because if you can, you shouldn't be doing this application. We're wasting everybody's time. But if you're truly limited, how long can you stand? How far can you walk? Do you have any trouble sitting? Are you having trouble with your focus and your concentration? People don't like to admit those things. Nobody wants to admit their weaknesses. But you can't be a tough guy, right? And again, you've got to be brutally honest. I'm not saying be overly dramatic or anything like that, but you got to be brutally honest with yourself before we can do this.
Well, and that's interesting to me, because again, a theme that we've had with these conversations is how, yes, there's the law and there's the way we work through the law, but we're still dealing with humans. And so the very human thing is to, have a tough time accepting reality when something big changes, especially regarding someone's health. And so I think that's a great thing to call out, because your attorney's not there to be your grief counselor, but there is an element of that when you're proceeding through these types of applications or working through this stuff. And so I think that's a wonderful thing to call attention to, because that will be something that could trip you up if you say, no, I'm the tough guy. I can still lift 50 pounds. And then, well, okay, then why are you talking to me?
Right. Exactly right. It's really hard to come to grasp with when things change for us, right? We all have that trouble, right? We all think back, I still think I have hair, but then I look in the mirror and it's gone. But, so we all have these troubles, right? I don't know, trouble's not the right word, but we all have this reality that we have to grasp, the reality of today. What is our issue today? And if our issue is that we can't work, why can't we work? What's going on with us?
I'm thinking about, let's say someone's gone through the application process, they're qualified, and they're approved. What happens then once they're approved? What are some things people should be thinking about when that occurs?
Sure. So again, it all depends on everybody's unique situation. But if we're talking about SSDI, a disability claim, what we need to be thinking about is maintaining our appointments with our doctors so that the evidence remains there. Quite often, particularly if somebody's a bit younger, after they're approved for disability, the administration will ask for a review, a continuing disability review, CDR, continuing disability review. And, a couple of years after the award, the administration is going to want to review your case and determine, are you still disabled? And sometimes people make the mistake of not following up with their doctors once that application is approved. Reason being, doctor said there's nothing more they can do for me. As an example, I'm as good as I'm going to be, or what we call maximum medical improvement. You're not going to get any better. But you still need to maintain that evidence. You still need to maintain those complaints that you're still seeking advice. Even if it's just a biannual or annual checkup, just maintain your treatment so that the record is there to show that your condition remains as it is, or if it's gotten worse. And certainly if it's gotten better, then maybe it's time to try to go to work.
Yeah, very interesting. To wrap things up, I'm curious, at what point would somebody want to bring in an attorney for this whole process of applying or working with SSI or SSD? And what advice might you give them when they're considering to apply?
Well, in my opinion, you should get competent legal advice as soon as you start thinking about it. If you've been hurt, work injury, motor vehicle accident, been diagnosed with a disease, cancer, whatnot, get that advice right away. Don't just decide, I'm going to apply and go on the computer, hook up the website and go. Let's have a plan in place. I think that is of the paramount importance, is getting a plan in place, sitting down with competent advice, getting to know, what are the issues that you are facing individually? How is that going to affect you on a daily basis? Is there a good chance that you will qualify for disability benefits? And let's get that all in a row before we put the application in. So it gives you the best possible chance of not only winning, but winning as quickly as possible. These cases, from the time you file to the time you get in front of a judge, can take 18 months, sometimes longer. It's not just simply filing an application and you're done. There's a lot involved. Let's get involved with that right from the get-go. So that would be my advice. And if you happen to file on your own and get denied, don't delay. When you get that denial, you have 60 days from that date to appeal it and go to the next level. You don't want to start over. You want to appeal. So if you filed on your own and you get a denial, get on the phone with somebody ASAP and set up an appointment to meet with that person to help you with the next level.
Well, Mark, I think you'd be the first one I'd call.
Thanks.
Well, you'd help refer me to whoever's local to me. But
that's right.
Mark, I appreciate the conversation we'll be able to have. I have learned a lot about SSI and SSDI.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
This has been Disability Without the Detour with Mark Aiello. I'm Sam Henninger. And remember to like, follow, subscribe, because we're going to be talking a whole lot more with Mark in future episodes. Thank you again.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content from Disability Without the Detour.